My boss fired me on a Tuesday morning for disloyalty. Her words, not mine. She said it in front of half the office, her voice sharp and trembling with fake authority. I just stood there, holding my coffee, watching her face turn red as she told me to collect my things. It took her 4 years to say no to every raise request I ever made, but only 4 minutes to end my job when she found out I was applying somewhere else. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 36, a senior systems coordinator for a mid-sized tech firm in Chicago. Or at least I was. For 4 years, I'd worked under a woman named Linda Hawthorne, director of operations, self-proclaimed perfectionist, and the kind of boss who believed loyalty meant never questioning her decisions. She hired me back when the company was still small, said I reminded her of herself. That used to sound like a compliment. The truth is, I built her department from the ground up. I automated workflows, saved the company hundreds of thousands, trained half her staff. Each year, during my performance review, she'd smile and say, "Ethan, you're the backbone of this department. But times are tight. Let's revisit the raise next quarter." Next quarter turned into next year. Then another. Then 4. 2 months ago, I quietly applied elsewhere. Not because I hated my job, but because I wanted a future that didn't look like a treadmill. I didn't tell anyone, not even my team. But someone must have mentioned my name during a reference check, because last Monday, Linda called me into her office. She looked at me like I'd stolen from her. She said she felt betrayed, that my job search was an act of backstabbing. Then she cut off my system access, called HR, and had them escort me out. The entire time, I stayed calm. I even smiled when she said, "You'll regret this, Ethan." Maybe she expected me to beg. I didn't. I shook her hand, wished her good luck, and walked out of that glass tower into the cold Chicago air. That was 5 days ago. And tonight, as I sit here watching the local business news, I can't help but smile again, because Linda Hawthorne just made the front page. And she's about to lose everything she tried to take from me. The news headline was simple, almost cold. Operations Director under internal investigation. It didn't mention her name right away, but the photo did. Linda Hawthorne, my former boss, my self-appointed mentor, the woman who fired me for wanting better, was standing beside a company logo I knew all too well. Same sharp suit, same thin smile. Except now, the story wasn't about her achievements. It was about missing funds. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sound of the news anchor fade behind the hum of my refrigerator. It wasn't shock I felt, it was inevitability. I'd seen the signs for years. The budget reallocations that never made sense. The last-minute vendor payments that bypassed review. Linda had always been careful, but not careful enough. And when she fired me, she made one mistake. She forgot who set up the company's internal audit systems. I didn't plan revenge. Not at first. But on the day she escorted me out, she gave me a flash drive with my personal backups. I knew that drive. I'd built that protocol. It automatically synced every document tied to my user ID before the system deactivated it. I hadn't touched it then. I just placed it in my desk drawer at home. 2 days later, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of reports, financial summaries, audit trails, invoice logs. Most looked normal, but a few caught my eye. Repeated payments to a vendor called Eden Logistics, authorized under Linda's account. The amounts were just low enough to avoid notice, but consistent. Weekly transfers. Same memo line every time. Operational maintenance. Eden Logistics didn't exist. I didn't rush to act. I did what I've always done: observed, documented, verified. I spent the next 2 days connecting dots, matching timestamps, cross-referencing approval IDs. Every pattern led back to her. By Friday night, I had enough evidence to ruin her career. But I didn't want noise. I wanted precision. So, I made a single anonymous submission through the company's ethics portal, attaching 10 key documents. No explanation, no emotion, just data. That was 5 days ago. And now, as her face flashes across the screen, I realize she's learning the same lesson she once taught me. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. It means patient. The following morning, I woke to an inbox filled with messages from my former coworkers. None of them mentioned the investigation directly, just cautious, coded notes. One said, "You were right." Another, "It's getting messy in ops." The quiet ones never wrote much, but I could read between the lines. The panic had already started. I took my coffee to the window, watching the gray Chicago skyline blur behind morning fog. I wasn't celebrating. I was observing the rhythm of collapse, the same rhythm Linda had orchestrated for everyone else. I thought back to the day she hired me. She told me, "Loyalty isn't built on promises, Ethan. It's built on silence." She meant it as advice. She didn't realize she was giving me a weapon. At noon, my phone buzzed again. It was Mark, one of the senior analysts still at the company. He wrote that Linda had been suspended pending review. The CFO had personally ordered an external audit. Employees were being interviewed. The servers were locked down. HR had even called in the IT department for data recovery. That detail made me smile. I knew what they'd find, or rather, what they wouldn't. Linda had been careful to hide her tracks, but she'd done it through systems I built. Every deletion she made left a shadow. Every override left a log. The more she tried to erase, the deeper the trail would dig. That afternoon, I went for a long walk through downtown. I passed the glass tower where I used to spend 10 hours a day. From the street, I could see the floor where Linda's office was. The blinds were closed. I wondered if she was inside, sitting at that same polished desk where she once called me a disappointment. When I got home, I opened my laptop and pulled up a job offer email I'd been ignoring. It was from a firm that had reached out after hearing about my termination. They'd read some of the automation projects I'd built and wanted me to lead a new department. Twice the salary. Remote flexibility. No Linda. I accepted. As I hit send, a breaking news alert popped up. Company launches full-scale internal audit following alleged embezzlement. No names this time, but it didn't matter. Everyone inside that building already knew who it was. And Linda? She was finally learning what silence feels like on the other side. 3 days after accepting the new job, I received a message I didn't expect. It was from Linda. No subject line, just her name in the sender field. I hesitated before opening it. The first sentence was short, almost too calm. She wrote that she hoped I was proud. She said the company was tearing itself apart because of the audit, and that whoever sent that report didn't understand the damage they'd done. I read it twice, then closed the message without replying. She still didn't get it. The damage wasn't done by the report. It was done by her years ago, the moment she decided other people's loyalty was something to exploit, not respect. By that evening, the internal memo had leaked online. Someone posted screenshots showing that the audit had uncovered multiple falsified vendor accounts linked to an offshore payment system. The numbers weren't small. Nearly $500,000 in miscellaneous operational expenses. The article didn't name names yet, but Linda's initials were visible in the approval codes. I watched the story spread across LinkedIn like wildfire. People who once praised her leadership were suddenly silent. A few even deleted old posts tagging her name. Reputation collapses fast when it's built on fear. That night, I got another email, this one from Mark again. He said Linda had been escorted out of the building that afternoon. Her office door locked, her access revoked, just like she had done to me. He added one line that stuck with me. She looked shocked, like she never thought it could happen to her. I didn't feel anger or triumph. I just sat there, remembering her words from that day. This is backstabbing. She was right, in a way. But I hadn't stabbed her. I'd simply held up a mirror. Before going to bed, I replied to her original message with 2 words, take care. Nothing more. The next morning, I started my new job. Different company, different culture, but the same tools I'd once used to build her empire. Only this time, I wasn't building for someone else. As I logged into the new system and saw my title, Director of Infrastructure, I realized something. I hadn't just gotten even. I'd graduated. Quietly. The first week at my new job felt like stepping into another world. The office was quiet, efficient, built on trust instead of ego. My new manager, Claire, was the kind of leader Linda could never be. Calm, direct, and uninterested in control for control's sake. She gave me full authority to rebuild their data infrastructure. We trust results, not noise, she said. I couldn't help but appreciate the contrast. Still, part of me kept an eye on the headlines. Linda's story wasn't over. The investigation had escalated to federal auditors after discrepancies were found in cross-department transfers. The company released an official statement about financial misconduct by a senior executive. The internet did the rest. A former coworker sent me a screenshot from the internal chat system. Employees were calling it the Hawthorne fallout. People who had once feared her were now dissecting her downfall like a case study. There was irony in how quickly fear turned into relief once the tyrant was gone. One afternoon, Claire called me into her office. She said she'd heard whispers about what happened at my last company. I froze for a second, but she smiled. "Don't worry," she said. "We like people who can keep quiet under pressure. I read your public record. You handled it professionally. That tells me everything I need to know." It struck me how simple it was for someone to see integrity where another had seen betrayal. Same man, different eyes. That night, I walked home through the city. It was raining, soft and cold, the kind that muffles the world. I thought about the day I was fired, how Linda had smiled, believing she'd taught me a lesson. She had, just not the one she intended. The next morning, I got a message from Mark again. The audit was complete. Linda was officially charged with embezzlement and falsification of financial records. There was a line in his email that stayed with me. She said someone inside must have set her up. She still doesn't realize she did it to herself. I closed the email, leaned back in my chair, and watched the city wake through my window. I didn't smile this time. I didn't need to. Because sometimes, silence isn't revenge. It's the final report. A few weeks passed before Linda reached out again. This time it wasn't an email. It was a letter, handwritten, folded neatly into an envelope with no return address. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Her handwriting was still perfect, just like her presentations used to be. The letter was 3 sentences long. She said she knew it was me. She said I'd ruined her life. And then she said she hoped I could sleep at night. I folded it back and set it on the table. It didn't feel like guilt, not even satisfaction, just distance. Because the truth was, I'd slept better in the last month than I had in years. At my new job, things were moving fast. The automation project I designed had started saving the company money within weeks. Claire mentioned my name in an executive meeting, said the board was impressed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a replaceable cog. I felt essential, not because someone told me I was, but because the work spoke for itself. But success never comes without ghosts. One night, while reviewing system logs, I caught myself double-checking every detail, scanning for flaws that weren't there. Linda's voice still lingered in my head, that sharp tone she used whenever she wanted control. I realized then that part of her had stayed with me. Not her power, but her shadow. I decided to use it. Channel it. Every late night I spent building systems, every quiet moment of precision. I poured it all into creating something unbreakable. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same silence she'd used to suppress others was now the engine of my progress. 2 days later, the news cycle finished what I had started. Linda's company issued a final statement announcing her termination for cause. Her accounts were frozen. Her reputation, gone. It was the kind of ending most people only fantasize about. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. I just went to work the next day, poured myself a coffee, and sat down at my desk like nothing had happened. Because in the end, quiet victories don't need applause. They just need to be complete. Winter came early that year. The city was gray and heavy with cold rain that froze against the windows by morning. My new office overlooked the river, and every day I watched the water move slower, thicker, as if time itself was turning cautious. I liked that. The stillness. The control. By then, word about Linda's fall had spread everywhere. She wasn't just fired. She was blacklisted. The company she once ruled had scrubbed her name from all official documents. The industry she dominated now treated her like a ghost. Every professional forum, every networking circle, no one would touch her. Mark sent me an update one morning. He said the board had finished its legal review. The missing money traced directly to Linda's personal accounts, hidden under layered shell vendors. He said the investigators had called it a quiet heist, small amounts over years. I couldn't help but think of her own words. Loyalty is built on silence. She'd finally drowned in the thing she worshipped. Still, part of me wondered how far she'd fallen. One afternoon, during a break, I searched her name online. The first result was an article about corporate ethics failures. Her photo sat beside the headline. Under it, the caption read, "When control turns to collapse." That night, I found myself walking the same route I used to take after work at her company. Past the same glass building, the same security desk, the same revolving doors that had once closed behind me. Except this time, no one inside knew my name. And no one had to. When I got home, the letter she'd written still sat on my kitchen counter. I hadn't thrown it away. Not because I cared about her words, but because it reminded me of something important, that even the people who think they're untouchable are just waiting for a system to notice. I poured a drink and stood by the window, watching the lights shimmer across the frozen street. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't even think about what she'd cost me. I thought about the quiet moments, the ones where you don't need to prove anything, don't need to shout. The kind where the world finally sounds exactly the way you planned it to. A month later, the city thawed, and with it, so did the last traces of that old life. The audit had ended. The lawsuits began. Every few days, headlines surfaced about the company restructuring, new leadership, new compliance teams. They were rebuilding what Linda had quietly dismantled for years. It was strange watching it from the outside, like seeing the cleanup after a storm you predicted. One afternoon, Claire called me into her office again. She said the board had approved funding for an expansion of my department. She wanted me to lead the integration team. "You've built systems that don't break," she said. "Now build people who won't either." I told her I would. But that night, I couldn't shake the irony. For years I'd worked under Linda, asking for one promotion that never came. For weeks under Claire, and I was being trusted with more than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't luck. It was clarity. A few days later, Mark messaged me again. He said Linda had been officially charged, fraud, falsified reports, misuse of company assets. He said she looked hollow when she appeared in court, like someone who hadn't just lost her career, but her reflection. He asked if I felt sorry for her. I told him I didn't feel anything at all. That same night, I took a walk down to the river. The ice had finally broken, drifting downstream in silent, jagged pieces. I stood there a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, not just to her, but to me. The firing, the silence, the waiting, the quiet work no one saw, but that changed everything. When I got home, I opened that last email she'd sent, the one where she said she hoped I could sleep at night. I read it once more, then deleted it. Not out of anger, out of peace. Because in the end, I realized something she never had. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from understanding when to let go. I turned off my laptop, stood in the dark room, and smiled to myself. The noise was gone. The storm had passed. All that was left was the quiet, and I'd earned every second of it. Spring came slow that year, the kind that made the city look cleaner than it really was. I was sitting in my new corner office, watching the reflection of rain streak down the glass, when Claire knocked on the door. She said the board had approved my full promotion, Director of Systems Integrity. I'd built something solid, something people trusted. She told me, "This department doesn't just run smoothly, Ethan. It breathes." After she left, I sat there for a while, staring at the skyline. It felt surreal. For years of being overlooked, dismissed, and undermined, all leading to this quiet moment of stability. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just opened a folder on my desktop labeled Old Files. Inside were copies of everything from my time at Linda's company, her reports, her invoices, the traces of her empire before it collapsed. I hovered over the delete key, then stopped. Some memories don't deserve to be erased. They deserve to stay as proof of what you survived. A week later, I got a message from Mark. He said Linda had taken a plea deal. No trial, no spectacle, just an ending that felt small compared to the damage she'd done. Probation, restitution, barred from working in corporate management ever again. He wrote that she was moving out of the city. She said she's starting over, he added. Starting over. The word sat heavy. I knew what that meant. She wanted to rebuild something new from the ashes of what she'd broken. I wondered if she'd finally learned what silence really meant. That evening, as I left the office, I passed by a TV in the lobby showing a business news segment. They were talking about corporate ethics again, a follow-up on Linda's case. The anchor said she'd declined to comment, choosing instead to step away from the public eye. For the first time, I almost felt a trace of empathy. Almost. But then I remembered how easily she'd cut me off, how she'd called ambition betrayal. I walked out into the night air. The streets were slick with rain, the world moving quietly around me. And I realized something important. Revenge isn't fire or fury. It's calm. It's walking past the ruins you didn't have to destroy yourself. because they collapsed the way they were always meant to. It's been almost a year now. A year since the day Linda fired me in front of everyone, calling me a backstabber. A year since I walked out of that building with nothing but a cardboard box and my silence. Funny how much can change when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who never wanted to see it. The company I work for now feels nothing like the one I left. There's no fear in the hallways, no forced smiles during meetings. People speak openly, make mistakes, fix them, move on. Claire runs it like a human being, not a queen guarding a throne. Sometimes she asks for my opinion before making big decisions, and every time she does, I think about how Linda used to take credit for my ideas, convincing herself she was the genius. The contrast still stings, but in a way that reminds me how far I've come. A few weeks ago, I got an unexpected email. It was from a small consulting firm in another state. They were asking for a character reference for Linda. Apparently, she'd applied for a mid-level operations role, the kind of position she would have mocked before. The request sat in my inbox for 2 days. When I finally replied, I kept it factual. She's meticulous, ambitious, and driven, I wrote. Then I added one line that told the truth without noise. But her leadership style thrives only in systems without oversight. No lies, just precision. I never heard back from that firm, but last week, I saw that the posting was still open. I guess they made their decision. Tonight, as I sit in my apartment overlooking the river, I think about how quietly everything fell into place. Not through shouting, not through revenge, but through patience, the kind that makes noise unnecessary. The city lights ripple across the water, steady and controlled, just like the systems I build. Linda once told me that silence was weakness, that people who didn't speak up were meant to be led, not followed. But she was wrong. Silence isn't weakness. It's calculation. And when used right, it's louder than anything words could ever say. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.